I am prepared to state that I have been at locations where craft of unknown origin that did not originate on the face of this planet was there. I am prepared to state that while I was there, we saw living, dead bodies of entities that were not born on this planet. I am prepared to state that we had what they referred to as interfacing with those entities. I am prepared to state that the situation is they have a school to try to indoctrinate people. I never went to that school. I always refused. I am prepared to state that when I got out of the service in 1990, that they held me for 2 months, that I might better reconsider to stay in and not get out. I am prepared to state that I had orders that stated that I was supposed to get out November 1st, or November 1st, December 1st, I think it was, December 1st of 1989, that they revoked those orders, once again in violation of law, to hold me for 2 months, pending approval of my retirement, which had already been approved. The purpose of that was to try to convince me to stay in. We have contact with aliens not originating from some foreign country, but from some other solar system. And I have been a party to that. I've worked it, I've been there, and I know some of the things we do is really, 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 really terrible. They are not hostile toward us. We're the enemy in this instance, but we're the enemy, I like to think, for the good reasons. We're concerned about what some other country might do. I have concluded that I'm fighting against the clock, that I have but a short time to try to convince people that we are moving in an avenue where we are going to militarize space. Once we militarize space, we will have a whole new avenue of technology open up to us. While NASA says it's going to take another 1,400 years before we achieve what we call interstellar travel, I'm telling you, by the end of this century, we will be doing that. We want to acquire this technology. We want to make this technology part of our own technology. Within the next 25 years, we're going to militarize space. As a result of militarizing space, we are going to acquire new technology. We're going to evolve new technology that's going to lead us into interstellar travel. As a direct result, we will become a threat to them unless we spiritually grow also. But I feel that if we do not go ahead and spiritually grow, we are forcing the situation where the entities will eventually make themselves known. And they will make themselves known, and no power on earth can stop that from happening, in order to avoid us from going out into space.
Can we not force them to make themselves known? That sounded bad. I'm not sure. I'm not sure that we want to do that. Let's not force nobody. Can we be nice? Can we all like enjoy spending time with the aliens? Everybody get to know each other, have some first contact. Everybody's happy. Good morning, y'all. How's everybody doing? It's on the weekend, so I get to talk about some fun stuff. Not really fun. It's kind of fun. Not really so fun, but it's not fun because when you really start to listen to the people whose classifications, like whatever top secret stuff they worked on, now that their classifications are actually starting to age out, they're coming forward and they're giving these testimonies, which are scary. To be honest with you, it's scary as all get out to listen to intellectuals, professionals who work in the CIA, the Air Force, the Army, from multiple nations, world leaders. That's Gary, who's Eric Gary behind me from Grenada. You've got Paul Hellyer, the Prime Minister of the UK. You've got all the files being released by Russia and all the files being released by England. When you start to really look at these testimonies, and I have to give Stephen Greer a lot of credit, he by far is phenomenal. He's the one who pulled together all of these different professionals who worked on these quiet projects Um, he's the one that actually is putting them in I guess what you'll call the mainstream. He's the one who put together the Disclosure Project, right? He's the one who put together getting together all these professionals who had interface with technologies that some of them saw where they came from, others didn't, but it was technology that could literally put the earth back on a sustainable course. And he put that in a format that I think intellectuals can process, right? Because me, I have to be honest, like I said, I'm not the alien impregnated me and abducted me and baby stuff. Like to me, if you go to sleep at night, I've had some crazy dreams, right? I've had some insane, crazy dreams. And so I think, yeah, depending on what I ate, if I eat some ice cream, oh my goodness, I might dream. Who knows what I'm a dream of? So those things are kind of hard for me, for someone like me to process. You know, not to say that it didn't happen, not saying that it's not real, not saying that you dreamed it, but it's hard for me to process. What is easy for me to process is listening to professionals in the world who worked with these things, who can explain what they are, who can talk about the capacitors needed to reverse engineer and create these flying craft that apparently multiple nations in NATO have, which is crazy. That actually is what makes sense to me. Listening to people who are like me, listening to people who I think are analytical, who who process on that level, who have credentials, who actually did work for the government, who are now saying they have all this technology and we need this. Because that's where I get off. Where I get off is I want the next generation to be better off than what we are. And if we allow every piece of technology that gets developed by a human being, aliens, whatever it may be, to be utilized to murder people, take their resources, and try to dominate a planet, um, I don't think we get to exist. I think that we should be wiped off the face of the planet as a species if we continue to utilize all that technology just to murder people. So anyway, this stuff is real interesting to me. So I was looking at some stuff today. Somebody sent me a name, and that's who's behind me. We're at the United Nations. And United Nations, believe it or not, they some UFO people. They've been looking at this stuff for a long time. Now, if you say something to them, they look at you like you're crazy. But when you start to go look at the hearings and the activity, like the first damning thing about the United Nations was, oh goodness, this was going back into, I think it was, I have it down here somewhere. I think it was in the 50s, the first time they had a hearing based on UFOs. It was between Russia and the United States. It had to do with the Cold War and the fact that if they couldn't determine what the heck was flying around in the air and determine that it wasn't a nuclear weapon, that or bombers coming, that there was going to be a problem. And so it was mostly between Russia and the United States who wanted to have this decision made so that the UN would look into UFOs to determine or to establish some sort of communication between nations to know that they're not being invaded, that it's just the aliens. Think about that for a minute. Just think about that for a minute, that the UN got together and came about a decision. I can get the decision. I can get the number for you. There's actually a lot of websites. You can actually do a quick search for it online. But they got together, world's leaders got together and said, we need to have communication between top leadership and government so that if a UFO is flying over, we know that it's the aliens and it's not America coming to invade Russia. We know it's the aliens, so we know it's Russia not coming to bomb America. Just like process that. So I don't understand people who are still kind of thinking we're the only game in town. I don't really get that. There's more than enough information out there now to explain that our leaders are highly focused on this stuff. And for some reason, they don't want us paying attention to it. They want us focus what's down here. And I think our kids need to be focused on what's up there. Because I think that's the future. I know that's the future. I know the future is, if humanity gets one, it's humanity coming together and all being a family, right? All coming together as one earth, as opposed to all of these little ignorant groups and countries fighting over things that are down here, knowing that there's great abundance up there, right? It's like what we talk about throughout the week. Our problems are related to scarcity. There is no scarcity. If you now that we're studying all these planets in outer space and the asteroids and the comets, all the minerals we need are up there. Minerals we never even discovered yet, elements that we haven't even touched yet, are all up there. So any idea that the next generation should be focused on what's down here, to me, it's just ignorant. It's just ignorant in a loving way. It means that you're not really open-minded enough to understand that scarcity is what's wrong with the human race. And if we don't get some sort of abundance, to let these corporations and governments make their technology without murdering people in poor countries, we're not going to have a future. So anyway, so I'm going to talk about Gary. I want to talk about some, have we ever discovered some alien bodies before? The people that they find all over the planet that have the elongated skull, and the research that's being done at that. Some of that was Stanford University, and with the Atacama humans, and just from Peru to Russia to Europe, all over the planet where they're finding these skulls that doesn't make any sense. I want to talk about a little bit about just reverse engineering technology. There was a great testimonial. One I posted one this morning, but there was another one I wanted to show, which I thought was really, really interesting in terms of someone who worked on this project and discovered all of this. And just in case you didn't know my background, I I have friends who worked on some of this stuff. And so I'm not trying to convince you. I don't want anyone to think that I'm trying to convince you that aliens exist. I'm not trying to convince you that reverse engineering anything. Me, I don't care what you think. Like, I'm okay with whatever you think. My basic stance is that the human race has to come about some common ground points, right? Y'all can fight over your little whatever you want, what kind of government you want, capitalist, socialist, communist, healthcare, gun rights, like whatever y'all little things y'all want to fight about. I don't care nothing about any of that. What I care about is the common ground points that 7 billion people on this planet need to agree to. And one of those big points is our governments are always lying to us, right? If you take away their ability to keep us fighting and lying about the stuff that they want us fighting about, then we can make good decisions. If governments are allowed to have secrets, then there's no way on the planet that we can make good decisions, right? Information is everything. Information is power. And if they keep you in a little silo media ghetto and they feed you information that they want you to know, then they control you. They control your group. They can control your nation. They control your political party, whatever you want to call it. And so freedom for the human race, it begins with truth. And I know that truth is a common ground point for the vast majority. There are a few little silly people who still think governments should be able to keep secret technology to go murder people. And then there are people who want to know the truth. So anyway, here we go. So this was a brother. Okay, this is Gary. This is Eric Gary. He's the Prime Minister of Grenada. And he's in this topic of area for a couple reasons. One, there was one night that a fisherman came to him. I guess he was at a club or something. He was a party guy. And by the way, let's clarify. Eric Gary was a sellout. Okay, this was a colony, right? Grenada was a colony. This was a United States colony. He was a total sellout. And how do I know he was a sellout? Because he didn't look out for his people. He did pretty much everything that the U.S. government said. He was even knighted by the Queen of England. There's a clue. That's all you need to know. This was a colonized puppet government, and that's who Eric Gary was. But I think what happened is something happened with him, and he fell out with his puppet masters, and his people started turning on him. And they wanted him out. Long story short, a fisherman came to him one night and said, "We found something that floated ashore, and we need you to come and investigate this." And so he got together, he got the military, and they got 2 trucks, and they headed down. And, hold on, where was it? Let me get the details. So I make sure I got the details right. It was somewhere in, I think, the northern part of Grenada, the east coast of Grenada. Um, in fact, I'll just read it to you. So let me see. So the fisherman told him the story. And within minutes of hearing the fisherman's story, he put together a group of people he trusted, a small military unit, and two trucks and a photographer. They followed the fisherman north and arrived at the coast before dawn. There they met two fishermen that were standing over guard over a tarp-covered object. The tarp was removed to reveal a giant human body that was between 7.5 to 8 feet in length. One of the fishermen, directed by Gary, to the fact that the body had 6 fingers on each hand. The body appeared to be a white-skinned male that had long braided hair. Sir Eric said the body appeared to be of a young man, who, compared to a man of a normal size, would have been in his early 30s. By now, Eric had concluded that he and his group were looking at an extraterrestrial. He ordered the photographer to take pictures of the body with flash bulbs, but had the foresight to tell the photographer to save some of the film for the daytime. So Eric was in a position of power. He was already a shill for a lot of the world's governments, and it was this, and according to his testimony, a few other interactions that he had with craft that were flying over his country, that he put about the second decision that the UN ever made to actually investigate what in the world is flying around our planet. Now, this was 1960, it was a 66? 66? No. when was he deposed? I think it was 1977. I thought he was deposed. The revolution came in, I think it was 1978. So what happened was, he testified a few times. He brought different people from the United States military, mind you, to also testify that these things are flying all around and the UN needs to be looking into this. And finally, he got enough countries in the UN to agree with it. They made a decision to actually look at it. And within a year, I think it was 1978, he was deposed. There was a revolution. They took him out. And of course, the UN dropped it because he was the main force behind it. And I think the decision name, in case you want to look it up, it was actually I have the text, and I have the hearing. It's hard to find, but if you actually go out online, you can actually find the actual text of the hearing and the different men he took to give credibility to the fact that there's something out there that's interfacing. Okay, I don't have it right in front of me. But if you look up Eric Gary, you'll find it. And I'll post a link. You want to see the links, I just post the links. I don't mind posting it. It's crazy stuff. But see, it's important. A lot of things that he said that are like captivating me. I don't trust anybody. I'm a skeptic of everything. But when you have multiple people saying the same things, it's starting to key me in. So first of all, you're in Grenada. So it's not many of y'all, not many bright-skinned folks in Grenada, right? So I found it interesting that the alien that they said they found absolutely was not of African descent. It was not of South American descent. It was a creature that had very light skin, blonde and braided hair. What does that remind me of? It reminds me of the corroborating reports that you got coming out of Germany. How they were saying that the Germans were interfacing with a group of Nordic aliens, right? And if you look up Nordic aliens, and I think, where did people say they come from? They come from, is it the Pleiades or something like that? That this is what was behind the Foo Fighters that all the World War II pilots were seeing on both sides. And that the Germans were reverse engineering this technology, that they were working with this group. And that led to Operation High Jump and going to Antarctica, because apparently they were working on Antarctica. So what I like to look at, because first of all, I know the government lies about everything. So when they say it's not true, then I know it's probably true. And if you have hundreds of people who are actually starting to come out and say this, yes, thank you, Sister Lori. And you even have ancient cultures like the Vikings who are saying, yep, there was something. It starts to lend a little credibility. But looking a little further into it, come to find out that this all is, oh, hold on, let me swap my pictures. This all goes back a lot further than what I think we think it does. And is this a real picture behind me? I have no idea. I don't. We live in a time now where Photoshop people are phenomenal. You have no idea what's true and what's not. That's why, like I said, I like to listen to what human beings have to say. And so this idea that there are aliens interfacing with human beings, we know going back to caveman times, people were drawing them on walls and the religions. And so everybody looked up and they always said stuff is coming out. So I look at the people who are from like the CIA and um, the Disclosure Project. I look at them as just the cavemen who are writing on the wall. They're getting older. A lot of them in their 60s, 70s, 80s. And just before they die, when their classification project expires, they say, you're being lied to. You're not alone. We are working with these things. So there was one I posted today I thought was pretty powerful. It was, what was the gentleman's name? It was Don Phillips. He was a contractor for the U.S. Air Force, CIA, Lockheed Martin, Skunk Works. He worked on the Blackbird. My uncle worked on the Blackbird. So he worked on the SR-71. So he was high up in all of this. And he had a great testimony. If you want to watch it, it's about 20 minutes. I posted earlier today. And he kind of walked you through that, yes, that these were programs that we utilized to grab technology. He kind of explained a few things that I didn't know. He was talking about how with Roswell, he said, yes, Roswell's real. And he says what happens is, you know, when these, because it's a good question. Like, because this is what I wonder. If aliens are coming here, I'm like, how in the heck do you fly between star systems and galaxies and universes, but you get in our atmosphere and crash? That makes no sense to me. Like, to me, that's not logical. I think I said that. I was thinking when we were talking about this stuff last week. Like, that doesn't make sense to me when you try to analyze something. But his point was, he said that the problem is it's our radar technology. And so when they get too close to radar towers, it interfaces with their, I guess, the ship that they're flying, and the ships can crash. And his point was, he thinks it's unintentional. And he said it in a way, if you listen to his testimony, that it perhaps was intentional, that we actually do this to get the crafts to crash. So listen to his testimony. It was really deep. I won't play it because it was a very long one. And why am I like really leaning towards the Disclosure Project? Like I said before, to test it, what they want to do is they want Congress to have hearings on this. They want Congress to have hearings on the matter of UFOs and aliens. And the damning thing about that is if you lie to the U.S. Congress in a hearing, it's a federal offense. It means you go to prison. So when you got moms and dads and grandmas and grandpas, people who have lives, they were doctors in the military, they were security guards in the Air Force, and they're saying, I saw this, this is exactly what happened, and this is true. If they're actually shown to be lying, they go to prison, federal prison. And so when you have average people who are willing, and I think it's about 1,000 of them now, who are willing to go to prison to say, no, this is true in the world, y'all need to focus on this because this technology needs to be used to help humanity, not to just make airplanes and stuff, weapons of war. So it's just a phenomenal thing. And so this is why I focus on them, because I think this is, it's important. And so that was in his testimony. Another thing he said that jumped out at me is that he said that Roswell was nothing new, right? That come Roswell, that was the one we found out about, that they were actually recovering craft prior to that. There's a great one I do want to show you. There was another gentleman where he was involved, and I think it was in the 1950s, he said, they pulled him into making the flight simulators. the flights. So by the 1950s, he was making flight simulators to train pilots to fly in the crafts they were reverse engineering. And this is what I think a lot of people are talking about when they're saying, when you look up and you see UFOs, they're not aliens flying, not most of them. They're saying they're United States aircraft. But even more so than that, he went a little further. He said, though, that in the 1950s and 60s that NATO was involved with this, and that NATO actually put together a report and released it to multiple nations that that got multiple nations leaders involved in this. And so there were groups that had keys to the kingdom. What do I think a lot of that has to do with? I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that when you make it into space travel, and this is, I'm an old Star Trek guy. Like, I believe uh, uh, when something comes into your space, you want to make sure that that thing is not crazy. That thing is not violent. And so, one of the theories in Star Trek First Contact was that when you actually get into space, then they kind of bring you into the fold and they explain to you, okay, you can fly around out here, but you're not going to act crazy, stupid, dumb. The murder and all the crazy stuff you're doing on that planet, you can't do up here. And if we got some bases or something on the moon, you can't do that here. And to me, that's all very plausible. But let me show you that. I want to show you this testimony right here. This was a deep. Once again, let me just clarify. When you testify in front of Congress, if you lie, you go to federal prison. And this is why I trust people who talk about these things, and the hundreds of them, and I think over 1,000 professionals that do now, than I will a government that I know that's always lying to me. So check this out, and definitely check out the Disclosure Project.
Years in Marine Corps, 4 years working with the Air Force as a
Back
civilian.
that up.
I've spent 10 years in Marine Corps, 4 years working with the Air Force as a civilian, doing experimental testing on aircraft. Since my Marine Corps days, I was a pilot in the service and a fighter pilot, and fought in World War II after the latter part of World War II and the Korean War conflict. I was at the and went up as far as the Yalu River. I didn't start working on flight simulators until about, well, the year was 1954 in September. And, well, a little later than that. Let me go back a little bit. After I got out of the Marine Corps, I took a job with the Air Force at Wright-Patterson, doing experimental flight testing on various different modifications and tech orders that they had incorporated into aircraft, various different aircraft, F-89, back then the B-47, F-102, and those aircraft. While I was at Wright-Patterson, of course, I was approached by an individual that, and I'm not going to mention his name, to determine if I wanted to work in an area on just new creative things, okay? And apparently that was the flying disc simulator. What they had done, they had selected several of us, and they reassigned me to Link Aviation, which was a simulator manufacturer. At that time, they were building what they call the C-11B and F-102 simulator, B-47 simulator, and so forth. And they wanted us to get the experience before we actually started work on the flying disc simulator, which I spent 30-some years working on.
So they had flying disc simulators. To your knowledge, when was the earliest they had them in operation?
I don't think any went into operation until the late or early 60s, around 62 or 63. As I watched, the reason why I'm saying this is because the simulator wasn't actually functional until around 1958, where the simulator was actually operable. The simulator that they used, or the craft that they used to build, which is a 30-meter one, was the one that crashed in Arizona, Kingman, Arizona, back in 53 or 52. I think it was 53. That's the one they used. That's the first one that they took out to the test site.
Okay, so let me clarify something here, right? So what he's talking about he worked on developing the flight simulator. The only purpose, if you're not familiar with the Air Force, the only purpose of a flight simulator is to teach people how to fly a craft that you already have in existence. And so his report, and if you don't believe him, that's fine. You don't believe in his credibility and the fact that, you know, who he worked with, understand that he's not one person. Understand that there are hundreds of officers in the military who are saying the same thing. Everyone from Bob Lazar all the way out. So what we're weighing his testimony against is the fact that he's not the only one, right? It's called corroborating evidence when you have multiple people, over 1,000 now, who are saying they all worked on this technology that could be utilized for good things as opposed to military application. So I'm gonna keep going.
It was a controlled craft, you know, that the aliens wanted to present to our government, or the USA. It landed about 15 miles from, which used to be an Army air base, which is now a defunct Army base. I forget, I can't recall the name of it. But that particular craft, there were some problems with, number one, getting it on the flatbed to take it up to Area 51. They couldn't get it across the dam because of the road. It had to be barged across the, the Colorado River at the time, and then taken up to where people go now, up 93, out to Area 51, which was just being really constructed at the time, and taken down those dirt roads and out to that particular area of the test site. There were 4 aliens aboard that thing, and those aliens went to Los Alamos for basically, it was a sort of a test thing. They set up the Los Alamos with a particular area for those guys, and they put certain people in there with them, people that were astrophysicists, just general scientists, to ask them questions. The way the story was told to me was there was only one of them that would talk to any of these scientists that they put in the lab with them. Only one of the aliens. The rest wouldn't talk to anybody, or even have a conversation with them. First they thought, it was all, ESP, or, what do I want to say?
Telepathy?
Mental telepathy. But, most of that is kind of a joke to me, because they actually speak, maybe not like we do, but they actually speak and can converse,
All right, so before anybody gets lost, because people start watching stuff, they're like, oh, he's talking about aliens. That's crazy. This gentleman was one. Captain Bill Uhouse, that's who this is. He was one of the very first to join the Disclosure Project. But since then, there are, if you listen to the testimonies, there are multiple testimonies who explain that there's not just one group of aliens that our government interfaces with through NATO, through all these different countries, to reverse engineer technology for corporations for military application. But there's one testimony who said that there were 12 different groups of aliens that the governments were aware of. There was one gentleman who said there were over 50. So if you want to, look at him and say, oh, he's crazy talking about aliens, he's a crazy old guy. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. But he's not the only one who's saying this. So when you do things in a court of law, you have multiple eyewitness testimonies. He is one in hundreds.
But there was only one. The difference between this aircraft or this disc and other discs that they had looked at was that it was much simpler design. In the simulator, it was one big thing different. The thing that, like Lazar calls the reactor, okay, we didn't have a reactor. We had a space in a thing that looked like the reactor, but that wasn't the thing we operated the simulator with. We operated with 6 uh, large capacitors that were charged with 1,000,000 volts each. Say there were 6 million volts in those capacitors. They're largest capacitors ever built. These particular capacitors, they last for 30 minutes, so you could get in there and actually work the controls and do what you had to get the aircraft or get the simulator, the disk to operate. Okay, so it wasn't that simple because we only had 30 minutes. Okay, and the reason why it was designed like that photo I showed you was actually when it was operable, it would lift off the ball about a certain amount of there was a dimension there that we had that it actually lifted up, and it could actually turn, you know, a certain amount of degrees left to right or whatever. But in a simulator now, you'll notice that there are no seat belts, right? And the same thing with the actual craft, no seat belts. You don't need seat belts because when you fly one of these things upside down, there's no upside down like in a regular aircraft. You have your own gravitational field right inside. So if you're flying upside down, to you, you're right side up.
Did you ever get inside the actual craft?
I was in there for startup, sure.
How do they image? How do you look out the windows from one of these things with a controlled
Actually, we didn't look out any windows. There weren't any windows. The only place we had any visibility at all, and it was done with cameras or video type things at that time, was in the turret section. My thing was the flight deck, and the instruments on the flight deck. I knew about the gravitational field and what it took to get people to, you know, train them to be able to come in that thing, you know, and operate. You would be sick or disoriented in about 2 minutes after getting in, after it was cranked up. It takes a lot of time because of the area and the smallness of it. Just to raise your hand, it becomes complicated. You have to be trained with your mind, you know, to accept what you're going to actually feel. And
so there's some
experience.
Perceptual distortion.
There's a lot of distortion, yeah.
Yeah.
Seeing, just moving about, after a while, after you get used to it and all, and you do it, it's simple. You got to know where everything is, you know, and you got to understand what's going to happen to your body. It's no different than, you know, accepting the G-forces, you know, when you're flying a aircraft or coming out of a dive, you know, and that kind of thing. It's a whole new ballgame. Each engineer that had anything to do with the design was part of the startup crew. You know, verify all their stuff that they put in works like it's supposed to.
Did our flight crews ever take one of these discs out into space?
You know, I don't know that. I don't really know that. I'm sure they have. I'm saying it probably took a while to train enough of the people or sufficient time. The whole big problem with this, with the disc, is that it's so exacting in its design and so forth, and it can't be used, it can't be used as a like we use aircraft today with dropping bombs and you know, having machine guns, you know, in the wings and that kind of stuff. The design is so exacting that you can't add anything. You can't. It's got to be just right. There's a big problem in the design of where things are put. Say, you know, that where the center of the aircraft is and that type of thing. Even the fact that we raised it 3 feet so the taller guys could get in and stuff. The actual ship was extended back to its original configuration, but actually raised.
So a couple things that I like that he said I found interesting. Right, they say that truth is stranger than fiction. I find it interesting that going back in a time into the 50s and 60s, that he actually would say that these crafts had no windows, right? The ones we're making, not the ones the alien gave us, but the ones we're making. They have no windows. Do you know how crazy you would sound if you actually said that there's a craft that we could get in and fly around that has no windows? Very deep. Testimony, it aligns with what Bob Lazar was talking about in terms of the electromagnetic gravitic drives, where they use these massive capacitors to actually create anti-gravity, which falls right in line with Nikola Tesla and what he said about the free energy in terms of capacitors and what we could do. Falls right in line with the fact that today, even the FBI still has redacted most of the things that were actually in the documents from Nikola Tesla that they released. So all of that kind of falls in line with it. And the other interesting thing that I found that I thought was really interesting is the fact that they can't put guns and they can't put bombs, right? That they were given a design of craft that doesn't allow for the use with the military, which might explain why they have all the classifications. All their classifications are expiring and have been expiring for the last 10 years or so. And people are starting to say the truth of what they worked on. But they figured by then they would already know how to put bombs on them and guns on them. But I find it interesting that, you know, if I were some sort of an alien species, super advanced, and I wanted to reach out and contact you, want you to develop space travel so I could explain the rules to you, how this thing works, and you won't bring your crazy monkey stuff up on here, or we're going to extinct you or just drop an asteroid down on you guys and set you back a couple 10,000 years or so, which every 10,000 years or so, the human race loses its memory and loses its technology, but that's another whole long discussion. It would make sense to give that species a craft that you can't use to kill, a craft that you can't mount lasers, plasma guns, or bombs, or you actually give them a craft of peace, which to me it syncs up with what a lot of the eyewitness testimony from the Grenadian military, the Mexican Air Force, the Spanish Air Force, the UK Air Force, now the United States Air Force and the Russian Air Force, and all the gun cams and showing these crafts flying around. They ain't shooting nothing. Ain't nothing happening. They were possibly given a design that will allow them to do reconnaissance type stuff, fly around, whatever. You think about the UFO that shut down the Chinese airport. You know how it just sat there, didn't do anything? It makes sense when you look at Die Glocke, the bell, right, from Germany, when they said that this was some of the studies that Germany was doing into it. There were no guns. There were no turrets. There were no bombs. And so I think that all kind of makes sense. But theoretically, and that's how I kind of like to think about things. I like to try to analyze them, look at what people are saying. You know, again, I don't know if any of these pictures of UFOs or any of this stuff is true, or if they're real or Photoshop, but I want to look at the plausibility of it. And if I were some sort of a species that were introducing a new race to space, I would give them the rules, but it's like your child, you know, if you're teaching your kid to shoot, do you teach them how to shoot with a 44 Magnum, or do you give them a BB gun or pistol? And I think that they basically gave us technology that has a safety lock. The technology can't be used to murder a bunch of people. And so let me see what y'all are talking about. I'm clarifying. I'm not trying to prove anything to anybody. I don't care what you believe. What I care about is our governments can't have secrets. And if all of these people, these thousands of people, you think they're lying because it doesn't fit within your narrative that's been given to you or your religion or your belief system, it still benefits you to let the truth come out, right? Like if all these people are lying, then we should be fighting for governments not to have secrecy so it can come out that they're all lying. But if they're telling the truth, and we do have Nikola Tesla type free energy devices that they're not releasing because they want to try to figure out how to get a gun turret on it and they can't seem to figure it out, then that technology needs to be used for better things, which is what the whole discussion is about. Let me see what y'all are talking about. I know a few things y'all popped in the room. Said, I think they're creating aliens to put fear in us, Mary. And Mary, I agree with you. I agree. Not to a degree. I don't think it's possible that there isn't intelligent life out there. Like that just is completely illogical to me. When you look at this planet, there's life everywhere. You look at every planet in our solar system, we found water everywhere. Water is the key to life, whether it's frozen, gas, or liquid. So there's life everywhere, just like there here is here on Earth. It's an illogical debate that the universe isn't teeming with life because the Earth is teeming with life. But in terms of fear, I agree with you. Like my concern is, and it was one of the testimonies in the Disclosure Project that they were going to use, the United States always needs an enemy. And it's not even the United States. It's the 1% of the 1%. They always need something to scare people, to get them to either fight each other or to say, oh, save us 1%ers. And it was one of the testimonies that they were going to use these craft to stage some sort of an alien invasion or just to create fear in the population, so people would fall back in line and, oh, please save us, or, and so further in his testimony, I don't know if I played the whole thing, but further in his testimony, he explains that to his knowledge, there were a couple dozen of these aircraft that the United States had, which is the whole purpose of, I think, the plausibility in his testimony, wherein he didn't fly the craft. He didn't do anything. He was just one of the engineers who worked on the flight simulators to train the pilots. If you don't have dozens, if not hundreds of them, why in the world would you be training pilots? And what are you training them for? And so I think it's important, Mary, for people to know the truth of what's going on, because if you do start seeing stuff flying out there, odds are 9 times out of 10, it's going to be us. And people need to know that. But again, if they have these secrets, then we can't make a good decision because we only know parts of the truth. Eva said, so it's like Men in Black could be happening. Wow, scary. Yeah, I do think it's like Men in Black. But everything is about greed and power, right? If you actually can recapture a craft and reverse engineer it, then you can make an awful lot of money from it, and you can make you can basically take over a world with it if it's the right type of technology. One of the testimonies I put forward this morning, it was from I forgot the name of the brother, worked in the CIA. He explained that microcomputers, Kevlar, lasers, and a couple other things he mentioned. He said these are all pieces of technology, things that they learned from reverse engineering that the corporations like Lockheed Martin and other military industrial complex corporations were figuring out, and they get the rights and the patents to little bits and pieces of it that don't apply to military technology to release to the general public. So that was a great testimony he did this morning. But it was a 20-minute one if you want to take a look at it. Sister Mary asking, why haven't the aliens contacted those in power, or why haven't aliens contacted those in power who care about humanity? I would guess, Mary, and this is just my speculation. I try to put myself, in this and try to come about some sort of analytical reasoning. If I were some sort of an alien species and my only requirement is that, I got a base on the moon or somewhere and I don't want you messing with it, I'll give you some technology, but you need to behave. I wouldn't really care, and I wouldn't really even look into who you were. If you were the one who made it into space and that was your guild and government, whatever, then I would contact you and say, look, you can't be coming up here messing around. Here's a little piece of alien ship that you can't use to hurt anybody. And kind of keep it there. Like, I think that I agree with the Brookings report. You can look up the Brookings report if you want. When we went to the moon, they developed a report called the Brookings report, which explained that if you find any artifacts or alien life on the moon, assuming we went to the moon, I got a lot of friends who don't believe we did, but I kind of think we did. I think we did. I don't know if it was that time because there was a lot of fake. I saw a video last night. I have to show it to you. It's funny. But the thing is that, so if we ever went there, that you could never release the information, that the world would basically be destabilized because the world's people weren't really ready to accept it. And I kind of agree with that. I think we need to know the truth, but at that time, back in the 60s and 50s, people weren't ready to know that they weren't the only thing. Like, you can't hit somebody whose whole narrative in life is about the only thing in the universe is us, and all of a sudden you let them know, no, it's not us. There are millions, if not billions of other species that are out there, it makes you, one, feel very insignificant. If your whole narrative is based on a religion and this God thing that lives on a cloud as opposed to some advanced species that's a genetic engineer, then yeah, I mean, you would just get up in the morning like, wow. You know, people fall in depression because they lose a job. What do you think would happen if people whose whole life is based on a lie or being significant to this God creature or whatever, and all of a sudden that's all gone? That's just blown apart. You know, so I can see the logic behind that, and psychological condition of most people, that you can't hit them. You have to slowly release it, which is why I think you got all these movies that come out and they slowly release information to the public, which is why I think all the classified, their requirements to keep this stuff quiet are starting to expire when they are, because they figured by now they would slowly be releasing the information, but I think they just couldn't figure out how to weaponize it. Or maybe they did figure out how to weaponize it, and now they don't care, and they're letting people find out. So then why haven't they tried to help us evolve? I don't think they care, Mary. I honestly don't. I think that we are one in billions. I think that when you get up there and you start looking around in the universe, you'll realize how abundant life is. I think you'll have I agree with Michio Kaku, who talks about, if we ever get into, he's a theoretical physicist, if we ever get into space, we're going to find destroyed civilization after destroyed civilization after destroyed civilization. Why? Because things happen on the macro scale the same way they do, you know, on the micro scale. So on the planet, when we go dig, you can pretty much dig anywhere on this planet and you'll find remnants of some ancient civilization if it hasn't already broken down and decayed. And why is that? Because 99.99999% of every civilization on Earth have all been destroyed, right? So going into space, it would be the same thing. So I don't think we're as unique as we like to think we are. I think life is all out there. Most species are probably trapped on a planet because you perhaps you're not allowed to get off of that planet until you evolve out of the wild that scarcity gives us. Like, I think every planet would operate the same way as Earth. When you have a species that's on a planet that has limited resources locally for that species, they develop those wild characteristics where they murder and kill each other over food, water, house, land, minerals, whatever. And over time, you have to evolve that out. And if you don't evolve that out, by the time you get to go into space, then I think the aliens look at you and they say, you know what, you can't join our galactic federation, whatever it might be. We're just going to nudge a little asteroid, a little nudge like that, and it lands in the ocean, massive tsunamis, or they just nudge it and hits the polar ice caps. You know what happens when an asteroid hits the polar ice caps? It's called an ice age. And I think that's why when we look at ancient civilizations, every 10,000 years or so, you see you see a climate that gets destabilized. You know, a tsunami can create an ice age. And so I think when they do that, they know it knocks back the species to a point where it has a minimal population. And we've seen that happen. And we've seen that with the plagues. They blame some of that on some of the plagues. And there were some theories about how they would just come spray something and, you know, our population dies back. I think it's all about us slowly evolving. And this is what a lot of the world's religions are about, right? In terms of peace and love and these things that, you know, we're slowly being walked into evolving into being a peaceful civilization before we're allowed to go out there. Otherwise, they just push us back into an ice age. And the very few people who live in, like, what's that ancient site? The ancient site in Malaysia that they found, the pyramid, and they think it's one of the oldest civilizations, that, you know, they push us back, and we live in those little places where they're just barely climate zones around the equator. Everything else is pretty frozen. And then we repopulate the earth, and then we run up and we run into something like, whoa, is that a pyramid? The hell is that? And then we put our hieroglyphics on it like we actually made it, but really it came from some ancient culture. And then that gets into what is his name? The Russian scientist we were talking about a couple weeks ago, the one who found the wheels in stone all throughout the planet, that there were wheeled vehicles, ancient cultures, millions of years old. And then that gets into like the Mahabharata from India, and they're talking about the Vimanas and, you know, the flying ships used to be around, which I think is interesting with his testimony. And you think about the ancient Vedic texts in India in terms of there were flying ships that maybe the aliens did this before. Maybe, and I say aliens, like it could be one, it could be a different species, who knows? But maybe they gave them the Vimana and they couldn't reverse engineer it, so they flew that one Vimana around, and finally, you know, it ran out of gas or something, and they just buried it under the paw of the Sphinx, and that's what Zahi Hawass is trying to find. So anyway, I keep going with his testimony. See what else y'all talking about. Yeah, I need one to get the word. Yeah, Brother Jack, so do I. And this is what I'm saying. They can't lie. And even if it's not aliens, y'all, because I got some skeptics, people skeptical of what, not me, but of what these people are saying, right? So if you are a skeptic of this, it means you believe your government. You believe that they're not lying about this, that they're actually telling the truth, but they lie about everything else. But you're disbelieving the thousands of professionals who worked on these projects who are like, y'all, hello, you know, this is not crazy. This is real. They got the technology, and it could be taking Brother Jack to work, but it's not taking Brother Jack to work. It could be rescuing people who are like on deserted islands. It could be, you know, helping children who are choking somewhere and the mom is trying to call 911. All of this technology should be utilized for human beings if it exists. Whoever made it, I don't care who made it. Personally, I trust humans. I trust when you get a whole bunch of them together who say the government's lying and we got this, I believe it. Who created it, I don't really care about so much. I have my own understandings. You got your own understandings. But when people are saying that this stuff is here and all this technology we have, we didn't create it, I kind of believe that. I mean, look at the last 50 years. Look at the last 100 years. Where did all this technology come? Y'all, we've been pushing wheeled carts around for how many thousands of years? How many thousands of years? And all of a sudden, within 50 years, we got spaceships. We got microcomputers. We got communicators. Nah, man. I know y'all think we're smart. I love y'all to death, but we are not that smart. I mean, if you really process that, for 3,000 years, technology basically didn't change. Nothing changed. We were pushing around wheel carts for 3,000 years, probably even before that. Nothing changed. Nothing. And all of a sudden, we got telephones, we got fax machines, we got computers. Like, come on, you can't be that. All right, let this brother keep talking. I just think about the logic of things. Human beings are not that smart. Think about what Edgar Cayce said and Nikola Tesla said and Einstein said. They go to sleep and they'd wake up and they just knew how to solve certain problems. Who helped them solve those problems when they went to sleep, you know? So, all right, let me let the brother keep talking. I just wanted to look at some of the comments.
We had a long period of introduction into meeting, you know, say an EVE, an alien. And I called him Gerard. Of course, that's what they called him, but that wasn't his, you know, I don't know if that was his real name or not, but that's the name that the linguist gave him, you know. So he knew Gerard, you know. And I did draw a sketch of him when he was, before I left him in a meeting, but, and I provided it to some people, but that was my impression of what I saw.
How much individual contact did you have with him?
Oh, he used to come in with Teller and some of the other guys occasionally on questions that maybe we'd have, you know. But you got to understand that everything was, you know, specific to the group. If it wasn't specific to the group, you couldn't talk about it. Mm-hmm. You know, so.
Need to know.
Need to know. And, you know, and he would talk, but he'd sound just like, if you spoke, he'd sound like you. You know, he's like one of the, you know, a parrot, you know, but he'd try and answer your question, you know. A lot of times you'd have a hard time understanding, you know, because if you didn't put it on paper and explain yourself, half the time he couldn't give you a good answer.
When you said there was a long build-up to actually meeting this person, what was the preparation like before you actually had a chance to have personal contact?
Well, the preparation was, basically going through, first of all, I went through all of the different nationalities in the world, right? Just, these, whatever,
Human nationalities.
Yeah, human nationalities, Then they got into going into other forms of life, even down to, animals and that type of thing. And the fact that, this Gerard had, his skin was pinkish, but a little bit rough, and that kind of stuff. Not horrible looking, or to me, he didn't look horrible looking. Some of the guys, that was in the particular groups that I was in, they never even made it, as far as I was concerned. When they gave you the psychological question, I just answered them the way I felt, and I had no problem, And that's what they wanted to know, if you'd become, hey, here's an alien, he's from here, and I don't know what, one of those kind of things, But it never bothered me, it didn't amount to much.
So,
All right, so what he's talking about an alien he was interfacing with that was helping with the technology, the engineering of this. So, to me, I mean, what is that? I think Trent just said that, for 4,000 years, they just decided to show up now. No, they've been here for a very long time, right? This is where religions came from, all over the planet. Pretty much every civilization across the planet on every continent all said something came out of the sky and taught us something, which is why a lot of our ancestors worshiped the stars and the sun and the moon and these things. And so you look at the Sumerians and what they knew. Another thing, looks like somebody said that they're marking stuff as spam. You know what? There are people who do stuff, they're trolls. Let me kind of clarify. So on my page, because I don't know, sometimes new people start watching, we are open debaters. Okay, we are intellectuals who are open-minded. If you are not open-minded, I'm not really that interested in talking about. I'm really sorry, I'm not. And we discuss everything. There is no topic that's you can't talk about. But what I ask is people be open-minded, right? What I don't understand, I understand people who say, you know what, I don't believe that. What I don't understand are people who claim to know something. There isn't a damn way on this planet they could actually know. So if you saw some aliens and you say you saw them, okay, I listen to you, whatever. You worked on the ships, okay, But if you've never interfaced with these people, you've never been there, and you just don't want to believe something, okay, I'm good with that. But that's not really, I'm sorry, my page really isn't the page for you. We are just open-minded people saying, you know what, I'm not sure I believe that, but that's really interesting. Because when you're open-minded, you can accept information. You don't have to believe it, but over time, it'll walk you into a greater understanding of perhaps how the world actually works. So try to be open-minded. Try to listen and be respectful of what other people have to say. Don't be so, I know something that I couldn't possibly know. Because when you do that to an intellectual, they'll look at you and like you're crazy. Because if you can't possibly know, why would you convince us that you know? We know you don't know because we don't know, right? So I like to listen to human beings give testimonies about things they experienced. And so that's all I ask. I just ask people, just kind of have respect, right? Have respect, for the brother that's talking, have respect for other people in the room. We're just open-minded people who like talking about things. I don't think any of my friends are going to try to convince any of my other friends that they know something that they couldn't possibly know. It's just information. And the reason I like to share this, the reason I like my weekends, I get to talk about some alien stuff, is because when I was a kid, someone told me something that blew my mind. I didn't really understand it at the point. And since then, I've had friends who worked on some of this stuff. And because I paid attention to a lot of this stuff, I was able to store all that stuff in my brain where I can link it together now and say, you know what? What this person says I've never heard before, But what this man says, I've heard 20 or 30 times before, and I even know someone who worked with someone who said that also. This might actually what we need to pay attention to. And why that's important to be that open-minded is because, like a lot of you agree, that if some ships come out the sky, we need to know what they are. We need to say, okay, if CNN puts out the report, some aliens invade, they're in the sky flying around all over Washington and whatever, we need to say, instead of running in the streets and start shooting everybody, it's aliens, oh my God. We need to stop and say, wait a minute, are those aliens? If you're an alien, land the ship, get out, and let me see you. Let me see that you're not you don't have a label that says United States Air Force, Russian Spetsnaz, let me see that, because information is key. So I'm just asking everybody, kind of be respectful. Let everybody just, it's just information. Let's not take it too seriously. So, all right, I'm not going to go on with his complete testimony, but this was someone who said a lot of things that were very plausible, that I appreciate, and he was a professional. He's someone who speaks logic. He speaks, he speaks in ways that allows you to just process the information and form your own opinion. There was another one. One of the testimonies that blew me away the most, though, was the guy who said that there were 57 species of aliens. That kind of, but, and I shouldn't be surprised, right? Because I get that there's no mathematical possibility that we're alone in the universe. It's just, it's a lot. Even an open-minded person, I think it's still a lot to really process. But I don't think we're all born to adopt these personalities of self-righteousness, right? That we are so great. All right, so let me okay. Here's the brother right here. You know what? I had a testimony of Eric Gary, but it's not. This was back in the UN, and this was a long time ago. And so they don't have the video with the audio. So I went out and found the text, and maybe one day when we just have nothing else to do, I'll play it. But it's long. His testimony was very long. But this was the film of right there. That's Eric Gary right there. If you missed the beginning, we were talking about Eric Gary. He was the Prime Minister of Grenada. He was the one who started the second initiative by the UN to look into extraterrestrial life. And just prior to him succeeding at that, the US government and the UK government shut it down. And I think that's significant because it links up with, well, one, it was the second time they looked at UFOs. The first time, it was about nuclear weapons and national defense. The third time, now they have an alien interaction department or something. Now they've got this lady who is in charge of interfacing with the aliens. And then the testimony I published this morning, which was the brother who talked about how NATO knew, and they handed to certain governments a portfolio explaining the different races of aliens, which to me is like, it actually makes some sense. And I think that's why they make movies like Star Trek and stuff in Hollywood, because they try to walk us down that path of getting used to this idea that there is some federation of planets or something. And, as your country evolves to a point where you do put satellites up, that you have to be introduced and know the rules of the game. And that actually might make some sense with what happened to that. What was the Russian probe that was going for, went to Mars? And it was on the way to Mars, and it took that picture of the massive cigarette-shaped UFO. And no, it was going to Phobos. And just before it got to Phobos, it took a picture. It saw the shadow of the cigarette UFO on Mars, and then the probe was destroyed. And the Russians released that information. So I think that's like a hint. That could be something telling us that, yeah, if you don't know the rules of the game, certain times you can come to Mars, sometimes you can't come to Mars. Mars is not yours. That's ours. And if you come at this time, we gotta know, or you gotta broadcast this signal or whatever, because we don't want you coming to our places. And so, I don't know. But this was Eric Gary. And so he was one of the ones that he pushed the UN in that direction. And that was, what was that? I forgot the decision. It was 33 I think it was decision 33-426 if you look it up online. But like I said, I'll post a link if you want to see that. Something else I found. Oh, this was the dude with the testimony. This was the one who said, and you know, and I'm a skeptic with stuff like, hold on, it's not this dude. That's a commercial. I'm a skeptic with stuff. This gentleman's testimony, and actually one of my friends knows him. One of my friends knows this guy. This was Clifford Stone. That's not what I wanted to show you. Clifford Stone's testimony was right here. Here's the right one. Hold on. Sometimes I don't have stuff queued up right. So this was during the Disclosure Project.
Describe what they look like.
This was during the Disclosure Project, and this was the group of people who did the press conference in Washington to try to get Congress to investigate the UFO phenomenon. So these are the people who want a congressional hearing that actually would go to prison, because they're poor people, right? If you're wealthy, you can lie to Congress all day. You can, somebody, I think Debbie posted it. Yeah, if you got money, you got friends in your protect, you can lie to Congress all day. But if you're like a couple hundred to 1,000 people who are trying to get corporations to release the patents to all this technology to help people, like, that's anti to the whole lobby structure and how the military-industrial complex works. And so that, to me, is what's really plausible about these people. But this was one of his testimonies that he was willing to give to Congress.
I could.
Which Congress said no to. Let me put that out there. So they said no. That's the important piece of that these people want to testify in front of Congress, and Congress said, oh, hell no, you ain't testifying in front of us. Nope. Nope. The dummies in our country, they don't get to know this stuff. This technology is not for them. It's for Wall Street. So watch this.
I could, but it would probably take a whole lot of time. The reason I state that, when I got out in 1989, we had cataloged 57 different species. You have individuals that look very much like you and myself that could walk among us and you wouldn't even notice the difference, except for some of the things that they might be able to go ahead, even in a dark room, and touch an object and go ahead and identify what color that object might be. They would have a heightened sense of smell, sight, hearing. The situation is that you have various types of what we normally call grays. We didn't call them grays in the military, but you had at least 3 types of the grays. You had some that were much taller than we were. The unique thing that I'd like to point out for the most part is that the entities that we did catalog were in fact humanoid. Now this created a situation where the scientific community was trying to figure out why that would be the case, because you would expect that if life evolved on other planets, that they would take on some type of other being, so to speak, not necessarily look humanoid or be bipedal such as we are. But apparently we got quite a few of the species out there that are humanoid in appearance, and that creates a question that yet has to be answered by science.
And I think science doesn't have to answer the question. I think religion already did. Why? Because God made us in its own image, right? So what he's talking about is, why in the world do all these aliens, why are they bipedal? Why do they have 2 legs and 2 feet? Why do they walk around on the planet? And this takes us down to the anti-comma human, right? So you guys remember, let me see if I got a picture of the anti-comma human. We started, and I was trying to find out where the research was on this yesterday. This is the one that they're researching at Stanford University. This was the one where they found it somewhere in South America. I forgot exactly where. And later, I think they came back and they said that, well, let's think about this logically, right? A monkey has 98% of human or 99% human DNA, but that 1% difference makes up the difference between a monkey and a human being. So if 90% of the DNA is humanoid, perhaps that explains why, you know, a lot of the species are bipedal, because God made us in its own image. That, you know, all these ancient cultures that talked about the hybrids and the humanoids, where they were merging DNA and experimenting with genetics, going back to the Egyptians, and, you know, you've got the dog-faced men and the lions on human bodies. You talk about the Sumerians who talked about the genetic engineers who were like making Adam. And it's funny that Adam and Adam are very, very, they sound like they're the same cat. That the gods were mixing their DNA with ours. You look at the Nephilim and you look at the sons of light. You look at all these ancient texts that talk about how we are hybrids. And so why? Because it makes sense that why in the world would all these aliens have two legs? That just doesn't make any sense. Somebody's monkeying with the DNA. Just look on Earth. We got slugs, we got snakes, we got things with 2 legs, 4 legs, you know, amoebas, things that just crawl around. So why in the world would all the aliens have 2 legs? Because whatever I suspect this whole, you know, making species from the dust of the earth, the microbiology, the bacteria of the earth, to me, if I were some super evolved species, what would I do? I'd fly around the universe and I'd find a planet. Oh, look at the Earth. Okay, the Earth is just about to be in a zone, a habitable zone where I can create something that looks like me. But the problem is there's no motion in the ocean. There's nothing to get going. So let me take this moon thing. Let me take an asteroid moon thing, and I'll put it right in a precise orbit so that one, they know, well, one, it'll create gravity waves and cause tides to happen to kind of get the soup mixing up. But 2, I'm going to put it precisely in the place so that there'll be a solar eclipse where my creature will know mathematically it's impossible that this moon be here unless it knows I put it there. So my species will know that I exist, I created, but it'll only know that after it evolves enough, develops space travel, and knows that the moon couldn't possibly be where it is, and it couldn't possibly not rotate, right? And so I'd put it there, and that would kind of get the motion in the ocean, getting microbiology, everything moving around. And I'd leave, come back maybe 1 million years later after we got something going, some sort of biological structure happening. You know, DNA is there and things are happening. And so the environment's coming together. And so then I would go and I would mix my DNA with whatever one of the predominant, the most intelligent species there. And I come back and I find find a reptile. And now we're not gonna do the reptilians. I come back and I find a monkey. Say, you know what? That daggone monkey's pretty smart. He got some tools and stuff. He hitting stuff and climbing on trees. You know what? I'm not gonna mix my DNA with the lion. The lion's not as smart. I'm gonna mix my DNA with the monkey. And so I think this God thing, whatever, genetic engineer, comes back, gets the dust of the earth, the bacteria of the earth, mixes it all together with some soup, throws in the monkey DNA, which is why we got 90% of our DNA with monkeys, you know, which is relationship to the cow. It's a mammal. And so that's why 80% of our DNA is related to cattle, something like that. And you actually make a species. But to me, it actually makes perfectly good sense that 90% of the anti-comma humanoid would be humanoid. It would be human DNA because we're hybrids of whatever that is. And a lot of other good things, delicious things they talk about, why humans don't fit on the planet. Like we're the only thing that does not fit here. We get sunburned. How in the hell do we get sunburned in the sun that we've been under for 200,000 years? That makes no sense. Why in the world do we got a tailbone? You know, that makes no sense. Like a lot of the things about why do in childbirth the majority of our children die? Like if we didn't have medical science and we, you know, why are our kids the only kids that are born? Every other animal, those animals are on their feet really quickly. They're either in a nest and they're protected, but months later they're flying. You know, giraffes within a day or two. The giraffes, the elk, all the prey, which is what we are. They're on their feet and going. Monkeys, they come out within a very short period of time. They're grabbing branches and they're doing flips and stuff. Human beings, we're like a ball of goo. We're like a ball of goo for a year before we even start moving. Do you really think something like that evolved on a planet this violent and everything else evolved to get on its damn feet and protect itself or run? I'm not buying it. So to me, I think that kind of makes sense. I wanted to look at some of the, and I can't hang out too late today, y'all. I want to look at some of the stuff, then I got to get, I got some stuff I got to do. So the other thing and it's just information, and it looks like the room calmed down. People, I'm glad y'all calmed down. It's just information, right? Nobody's trying to convince you of anything. We're just sharing information. And so what I find interesting that I think we do got to pay more attention to is why all of these creatures, not creatures, human beings, all throughout history, did what is it called, where they put the board on the infants' heads and they squish it so the head gets really big? Why did humans all over the planet, on almost every continent, started squishing infants' heads to make their heads look bigger, to make them look like the stereotypical alien? Is it possible because they met the stereotypical alien? What were they trying to mimic? And so I think that one's in Egypt, and they found them in Peru, they found them in Russia. But why in the world? And there were some, and I hadn't looked into it too deep. There were some that they actually they can tell whether or not it was done. I forgot. Somebody can post the name. I forgot what it's called, where they actually use the board to elongate the head. But the Ukraine and all over, and this is why, like I said, I don't think the mainstream talks about this stuff because, one. Oh no, what I was saying was that they say they can tell by the scarring on the skull whether or not it was made, with the boards, or if it actually was that way naturally. And I think going back, you look at some of the tales of like the Norsemen and, tales of the giants and like the Nephilim and the Lords of Light, that a lot of this DNA, it takes a little while to kind of get out, right? It takes a little while. You'll still have little genetic anomalies when you're making a hybrid. And when you're thinking about hybrid and the ailments humans have, I can't even sit like this for a long time. The back problems we have, it's obvious that we're not heirlooms. We're hybrids. Like I was getting to a good discussion the other day with someone. We're talking about plants, which is my favorite thing. Beyond UFOs and aliens and politics and people lying and stuff, I love plants. And so plants, you have stable genetics and you have unstable, right? You have the hybrids that are not stable. It's DNA trying to create something stable that works well in the environment. So you get these hybrid tomatoes and hybrid whatever, avocados, whatever you have it. They don't really reproduce the next generation the same as them because that DNA knows that I haven't created the perfect mutation to adopt to this environment. And so a hybrid will stay a hybrid for a very long period of time until it somehow gets to a point where epigenetics says this works well in the environment. This giraffe should have a long neck thing. So let's lock that in as an heirloom, and this will be a stable genetics. And so I think when we look at all of the different paleontology, I'm not sure if that's a word, paleontological. When you start to look at, all the different types of humans that come out, and every now and then you get a human being that grows to be 8 feet tall. Perhaps that does have something to do with some of those ancient genetics, but we became an heirloom after a while. And so when we bred, we had stable DNA. But when you start to see this all over the planet, from Hungary to Russia to Peru to North America to, who told all these humans to do? What were the humans trying to replicate in making, punishing their infants and squishing their heads so their heads got bigger, perhaps because they wanted to make them look like the gods. Perhaps they wanted to make them look like all the pictures the cavemen drew on caves. And so one of the things that I like to pay attention to with a lot of this stuff in terms of ancient archaeology, none of this is new. None of this is new, right? Going back, all the way back to the ancients, all the ancient cultures we can find, they said, damn it, it's UFOs. And they drew pictures on the cave. They wrote it on the tiles and the stone, and they put it in the scrolls. From the beginning of time, they've been saying something's coming from up there. And I hope that human beings have evolved enough that they got to a point where their minds are open enough to say, you know what? It's not just us. It's not just us. Not because I want it to not just be us, but because thousands of human beings alive right now, actually millions alive right now, are saying that they've seen all of this stuff. But thousands of professionals in professional environments working with this technology are saying, y'all need to pay attention that we have technology that could be utilized for humans, but it doesn't. And going back to ancient times, all these civilizations have said, We aren't it. There's something else, and we need to pay. And why? So anyway, I go off and I get to going, but it's a part of our evolution, I think, where we get to a point where we accept that we're not as smart as we think we are, that we didn't do this on our own, that something was here that our ancestors have always tried to tell us, but we never really listened because we listened to the 1% of the 1%. We listen. They're the supreme beings. There's nothing beyond them. And I think it's an indoctrination that we get lost into. And, and these are the points I wanted to put forward today. Well, let me see what y'all are talking about. But we can't play with this, right? This is not tiddlywinks. This is not something for a religious belief in not believing or believing. This is something that whistleblowers have come forward, thousands of them, and said that we human beings, need to no longer let our governments use this technology for their lofty ideas, that we human beings need to grab this technology and use it for human beings, for human evolution and future generations. And this is why I keep saying, all the kids need to be looking up. Why do they need to be looking up? Because pretty much certainly presidents of the United States, anytime they get posed with the question, they answer the question the same way. Don't look up. Y'all need to look down. We got human beings here that we need to save. Don't look up. Why don't they want you to look up? I always propose to you, always look where the bad guys say don't look. Because that's what a goodie bag is. That's where you'll find something. Gretchen, what you say? I love this too because we make no sense. We shouldn't even be here on such a beautiful place we destroy daily. So much good, but so much havoc. And Gretchen, and the only reason that havoc exists is because we allow it to. It's because of scarcity, because we don't accept the fact that, one, we can get up there. Two, the testimonies of the fact that we are flying around up there, that they can go get their minerals up there. They don't need to murder people and get the minerals down here. They can go up there and get their oil and their devices. We've been on oil for how long now? All the violence in the world exists because we believe this 1% of a 1% story that what we have today is the best we can do. It's the best we got. And I think we need to start calling it bull shizzle, not because anybody wants to believe in any of this, not because of any of the religions, but because of thousands of our brothers and sisters on this planet right now are agreeing with the millions who died before us, who said that there's a whole bunch going on out there that we need to pay attention to. I know, Brother Bajoin, I know you feel we're alone. I know, I got that. And like I said, I'm fine with whatever people want to believe. What I'm doing is I'm saying that in order for us to move forward, we have to start listening to people who don't think the way we do. We need to start opening our minds a little bit and just letting that data in, and let's not make stances on things we couldn't possibly know. That's my case. Let me see. Why did they elongate the head? Kimberly said, well, Kimberly, like I said, Kimberly, I think we were trying to mimic something, right? We were trying to demonstrate something like the uncontacted tribes in the Amazon. When we go to them, or the one that we went to, the missionaries flew in and landed, and they flew away after a while. They actually came back, was it a month or two later, and the whole tribe was dead. They had effigies of airplanes and stuff, and like they think that they committed suicide or they disbanded and walked into the woods or whatever because the gods left them. The gods, didn't like them because the gods got back in their airplane and flew away. And so I think that we will do the things that we've always done. We will try to mimic our gods. We will mimic the things that we think are gods, right? And so that's why I think they try to elongate their heads, because they're doing the same thing the Egyptians did, right? They had the masks of the dog face men, and every culture did that. So you try to mimic the gods. Brother Major. Yeah, I called you the avocado, man. We some avocado. We're hybrid. No, we're not hybrid. I think we're heirloom for the most part. We have pretty stable genetics. uh, Andrea said, humans evolved. Where? Yeah, I agree with you. We are not evolved. There's we we did not evolve. We are just some dumb monkeys running around. But I think we can evolve. I think we can. We got to stop being so arrogant. We got to stop knowing it all. We got to stop not listening to other people who have different perspectives. We have to listen. We don't have to agree, but just listen, catalog it, and down the road, you might have a corroborating story. But if, and I always go to the alien baby thing, but if I don't at least listen to my sister tell me I was abducted and they gave me child, and I might say, you know what, that's kind of crazy. That's a little stretch for me, but I won't dismiss her as she's crazy. I will listen and say, you know what, okay, well, I'm sorry that happened to you. You know, let's get to the hospital, make sure you're okay and everything. But it's something I'll catalog. And if I hear down the road a corroborating, I say, you know what, that makes some sense. And this is the whole same thing with the politics and the left and the right and this nonsense. If you're willing to listen to another human being and not dismiss them for being crazy, dumb, stupid, blind, crippled, you can actually take in that data. And if you can build a case for what they're saying might actually be true when others give you experiences that relate to that. That's why I think it's an important topic. Arrival, yes, Arrival is a good movie. I think people should watch alien movies in Hollywood because I think most of it's a lie. If aliens ever come here, assuming that they're not already here, I don't know. But if they ever show up in force and we meet some that really don't like us, you know, we're just going to disappear. There's no fight. There's no fight. If the aliens want to fight, that's the U.S. government with Russia and with China and India. They're just trying to scare us. I don't think there's a reason for aliens. If there's a species that's 1 billion years old, do you think they got to fight? Like, that's not even, my goodness, that's not even David and Goliath, as one of the physicists said. He said that's more like Bambi and Godzilla. It's not even fathomable. What if we can do this in 50 years or 100 years? What in the world of species, what technology they could develop in 1 billion years? Are you kidding me? Like, that's God. That's instant worship, which is probably where a lot of the religions came from. Doesn't make your religion less mystical. It doesn't at all. It's just, to me, I try to think in a very logical way, and I think things work in a certain order. And if uncontacted tribes are still worshiping the modern world, then if aliens ever show up, then we're going to worship them. And that's just how it goes. I just wish they would come over here and take me home. Yes, Buddha, I do too. Although I think we are home. Like like I said, I think this is a science experiment. And I think they made us and we're here and this is like a temporary home. I don't know. Sometimes, girl, like I was processing this the other day. Like, what if planets, they're just these little temporary things where these genetic engineers make us a little colony and we get going. And we do rape the planet, every civilization, because they know that it'll develop this massive biosphere that could support intelligent life. Intelligent life is encouraged. We evolve, we destroy the planet, we run out of resources, we get smart enough to realize we got to get the hell off the planet because eventually the planet's going to be enveloped by the sun or it's going to get hit by an asteroid. And so I think these are temporary things. I think our home is literally in space because multicellular organisms on planets, they'll all die out. Every species, there's no way a species could live on a planet without dying out. So I think the looking forward and looking up direction for kids, for the next generation, is a sustainability discussion in bringing about this end to fighting over resources on this planet. And always listening to governments and the 1% of the 1% that always lies to us. And we have to stop accepting. I think we have to start, and I'm going to end on this. Like I said, I had to do a real short one today. But I think that we have to really start listening to our neighbors more than our governments. We need to start listening to other poor people more than the 1% of the 1%. And if we have thousands, and I'll post the link because I want y'all to follow the Disclosure Project. Dr. Greer and these brothers, they're doing some phenomenal work. Keep an open mind. Listen to professionals. But we got to start listening to our common man more than we listen to our 1% of our 1% who we've already caught in lie after lie after lie after lie. So anyway, this is Gerard. I wanted to say, hey, this morning, kind of talk about a little alien stuff. Sometimes it's kind of fun. If you didn't catch the beginning, go back, watch the beginning. We were talking about the United Nations and how they've been involved with the whole alien topic from the very beginning, and NATO, and all the world's leaders were all involved. Well, most of the Western developed ones. And these are testimonies that come from people. Try to keep an open mind. That's the only way we evolve. We have to keep an open mind. When we come to a new land, and the new tribe says, damn it, there's short-faced bears here, we're not supposed to sit back and say, that's a lie. Ain't no short-faced bears there, because you're going to get ate. You have to say, damn it, what's a short-faced bear? Oh, yeah, it's a 20-foot, it's a 20-foot bear, huh? I ain't never seen no 20-foot bear, but you say there's 20-foot bears in your territory, and they eat people? Oh, yeah, I don't believe you. You're going to get ate by a bear. Trust your common man. Anyway, this is Gerard. Y'all have a great day. Love y'all to death.